You think you're untouchable in that fancy outfit, pal?
Officer Evans, back off. This is a courthouse.
Don't
Look,
tell me where to stand. You're obstructing me.
listen, I am presiding in 10 minutes. Move now.
I'm not done. You're coming with me.
Don't you dare. Get your supervisor here immediately.
That sound you just heard? It wasn't just a wooden hammer hitting the stone steps. That was the sound of a man's entire career imploding. It was just about 5 p.m. on the steps of City Hall. The sun was setting, casting that perfect golden light you see in magazines. But Officer Rick Evans wasn't seeing a photo shoot. He didn't notice the official robe or the bright red heels. He saw a black woman holding what he thought was a weapon. And his prejudice did the rest. In his head, he was taking down some dangerous activist. In reality, he had just assaulted Judge Anaya Washington, the most powerful judicial figure in the entire city, right at her place of work. The fallout was immediate and disastrous. In under 3 minutes, Evans went from being a tough guy cop to a national embarrassment, and it ended up costing the city a staggering $7.9 million settlement. So how did a simple photo shoot spiral into a major legal crisis? Before we get into it, do me a favor and drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from. Whether you're in the US, the UK, Canada, Africa, or anywhere else on the globe, I'd love to hear from you. And if this is your first time here, please hit that subscribe button. It's a huge help for the channel, and lets us keep bringing you these kinds of stories. All right, let's get back to what went down. To really get how huge of a mistake these officers were about to make, you need to understand the woman on those steps. Her name is the Honorable Anaya Washington. At only 34, she was basically a unicorn, a total legend in legal circles. She came up from one of the city's roughest neighborhoods, fought her way through Georgetown law, and became the youngest justice ever appointed in the city's history. She was sharp, had a commanding presence, and was respected by literally everyone, from the DA down to the custodians who cleaned the courthouse floors. Around the halls of justice, they called her the Iron Gavel. She was fair if you were innocent, but an absolute nightmare if you were corrupt. On this particular sunny afternoon, Anaya was totally in her zone. But she also looked surprisingly normal. She was on the steps of City Hall, posing for the cover of a major law journal to mark her 1-year anniversary as a judge. Standing on the bright, polished stone, she looked powerful, but also at ease. She was wearing her black judicial robes, and the thick fabric moved with the breeze, giving a little peek at her trademark red stilettos, a pop of color and confidence against the serious backdrop. She was holding an old-fashioned wooden gavel, a family heirloom that she held more like a treasured artifact than a weapon of authority. But here's the detail that kicked off the whole mess. To someone looking through a lens of prejudice, she didn't look like a top-tier government official. Without the judge's bench to elevate her, and since she was relaxed and laughing at something the photographer said, she just looked like a regular person. To a jaded eye, she might have just looked like someone in a costume. There weren't any bodyguards or velvet ropes, just a black woman on some public steps, holding a piece of wood. She had this quiet, confident power that didn't need to be loud. What the approaching officers didn't get was that this woman had a weapon way more potent than any gun. She had a perfect photographic memory of the entire legal code and the undisputed authority to destroy the career of anyone who even thought about violating her civil rights. They saw an easy target. What they should have seen was a giant red flag. They were about to mess with a sleeping lion, completely clueless that the woman on those steps could end their careers with just a few words. The whole vibe shifted in an instant. The quiet clicking of the camera was suddenly shattered by the squeal of tires. A police car jumped the curb and screeched to a halt right at the bottom of the big staircase. Officer Rick Evans got out, with 2 younger officers behind him. He put on his sunglasses, not really for the sun, but to hide his eyes. He didn't bother to see what was actually going on. He just saw Ania Washington, a black woman standing on a staircase holding a wooden object, and made a split-second decision that would blow up his life. To Evans, this wasn't a photo shoot. It looked like a protest. It looked like some radical trying to make a scene on government property. He didn't see judges' robes. He saw a costume. He didn't see a gavel. He saw a club. Without even giving a warning, the atmosphere went from calm and professional to hostile. Evans stormed up the steps, his hand resting way too close to his gun. He didn't ask what she was doing. He just shouted an order. "Drop the stick! Get away from the building!" This was the moment everything could have changed. Judge Washington froze, not because she was scared, but because she just couldn't believe what was happening. She could have shut this down right then and there. All she had to do was reach into her robe, pull out her ID, and watch them fall all over themselves, apologizing. But Ania Washington wasn't built that way. She was a woman of principle. She wanted to see exactly how these officers treated people who didn't have a fancy title to protect them. So, she held her ground. She held onto her gavel a little tighter, trying to embody the very law she stood for. "Officer," she said, her voice completely steady, with a dangerous calm to it. "I am on public property. What law am I breaking?" It was a fair, legal question, but to Officer Evans it sounded like she was talking back. He hated that. It's honestly heartbreaking to think about how quickly things can escalate when someone lets their ego take over. He took another step, getting right in her face, which was now turning a blotchy, angry red. "I'm not going to ask you again," he snarled, totally ignoring the photographer who was now recording the whole thing. "You're disturbing the peace, and you're brandishing a weapon. Comply now, or I'll make you." He was talking to a sitting judge, like she was a common criminal, all because he couldn't get past his own biases. He was demanding respect while showing zero. It makes you think about a scary question we all need to ask. What would you do in that situation? If you knew you were in the right, would you push back, or would you just give in to the injustice? Let me know what you think in the comments. Because what Evans did next wasn't just unprofessional, it was a direct violation of her constitutional rights. Any sense of reason just went out the window. In a flash, Officer Evans decided his pride was more important than the law he was paid to enforce. He didn't read her any rights. He didn't ask for her name. He just lunged at her. Without any reason at all, Evans got in Judge Washington's personal space and violently grabbed her wrist. The amount of force he used was completely unnecessary and just plain brutal. He twisted her arm back, yanking the fine silk of her robe. Ania let out a gasp as a sharp pain shot up her arm. But before she could even say anything, Evans snatched the antique gavel out of her other hand. He didn't just take it, he treated it like a piece of garbage. He reared back and threw the gavel down onto the stone steps. The sound was awful. A loud, hollow crack echoed through the plaza, the symbol of her family's legacy and her authority. An heirloom passed down for generations, just bounced and chipped on the dirty ground. "That's evidence!" Evans yelled, his face twisted in a mask of rage. "You're under arrest for disorderly conduct and resisting." "Resisting?" Ania yelled back, trying to stay upright as he shoved her towards a pillar. "I'm standing perfectly still. You are violating my Fourth Amendment rights." "I don't care about your rights," Evans roared. He spun her around and slammed her chest first against the cold, hard stone column. He fumbled for his handcuffs and cinched them tightly around her wrists. The same wrists that had signed countless legal orders, wrists that had the power to send dangerous people to prison, were now locked in cold steel by a cop who didn't even bother to ask her name. Can you even imagine being in her shoes at that moment? The photographer, though scared, was smart. He kept shooting. He held down the button, capturing a rapid-fire burst of crystal-clear pictures. The shock in Anaya's eyes, the vein bulging on Evans's neck, the crumpled fabric of her robe. Evans saw him and pointed a shaky finger. "You put that camera down right now, or you're next. That's obstruction." But the photographer kept the camera rolling. He knew what Evans was too blind to see. Every push, every insult, every broken rule was being captured in stunning high definition. Evans wasn't just arresting some woman, he was creating the evidence for his own downfall. He dragged Judge Washington down the very steps she commanded every day, showing her off like some kind of prize, totally unaware that he was marching headfirst into a legal firestorm. The arrogance was just off the charts. He thought he'd won. He thought he was being a hero. He had no idea that the video being recorded was about to become the most expensive home movie in the police department's history. The situation was at its most chaotic. Judge Washington was in handcuffs, humiliated, and being forced toward a squad car. Officer Evans was high on adrenaline, feeling smug about his big arrest. But just then, the massive bronze doors at the top of the City Hall steps creaked open. The sound was like thunder. It wasn't just a door. It sounded like judgment itself was arriving. Out walked Chief Justice Marcus Thorne. He was an older, very imposing man, and he was flanked by 2 armed federal marshals. He stopped in his tracks. He saw the broken gavel lying on the ground. He saw the photographer hiding by a pillar. And then, his eyes found Anaya Washington, his most brilliant and respected colleague, handcuffed like a street thug. Justice Thorne's voice boomed across the plaza. It wasn't a yell. It was a deep, powerful command that seemed to carry the full weight of the justice system. "What in God's name do you think you're doing?" Evans froze. He looked up, shielding his eyes from the sun. "Police business, sir. You need to step back. This woman is—" "That woman," Thorne cut him off, walking down the steps with a terrifying speed, "is Justice Anaya Washington. She presides over the very court you're standing in front of." The silence that followed was deafening. You could literally see the exact moment Officer Evans's world came crashing down. The blood didn't just drain from his face, it disappeared. His skin went a pale, sickly gray. His mouth fell open, but nothing came out except a dry, croaking noise. He looked at the woman he'd just manhandled. He looked at the robe he'd ripped. And for the first time, he actually saw her. He realized the costume was an actual judge's robe. He realized the weapon was a ceremonial gavel. He realized his suspect was basically his boss's boss's boss. I didn't, Evans stammered. His hands were shaking so badly that he dropped his car keys on the pavement. The clatter of the keys was the only sound in the whole plaza. All that arrogance and bravado vanished, replaced by a deep, gut-punching fear. This wasn't just a screw-up. This was the kind of mistake that ends careers and erases pensions. "Uncuff her," Thorne ordered, his voice like ice. "Now." Evans fumbled with the handcuff key, his fingers slipping, sweat pouring down his face. He couldn't even look at her. He looked like a little kid who'd just been caught breaking a priceless family heirloom. As the cuffs clicked open, Judge Washington didn't rub her wrists. She didn't yell. She just straightened her robe, looked Evans right in the eye, and said 3 words that turned his blood to ice. "I'll see you in court." Then she added, "But not as the judge, as the plaintiff." The photographer caught the exact second Evans realized his life was over. It was a perfect picture of pure, unfiltered regret. He had abused his power against the one person who knew exactly how to strip him of it. It's one of those rare moments of beautiful, poetic justice, watching a bully completely deflate the second he realizes he picked a fight with the wrong person. Be honest, on a scale of 1 to 10, how satisfying is it to see him panic like that? Because for Judge Anaya Washington, the main event was just getting started. The aftermath was like a bomb going off. This wasn't going to be some standard internal investigation where the police look into their own and, surprise, find no one did anything wrong. Since the victim was a top-level sitting judge, the district attorney immediately stepped aside to avoid any conflict of interest. The state attorney general took over the case personally. Within hours, Officer Evans's badge and gun were taken away, and his entire career history was put under a microscope. Investigators swarmed the precinct, pulling every single file they could find. They synced up the Bodycam footage with the high-def security cameras from City Hall. The result was devastating for Evans. Frame by frame, the videos completely destroyed his story. They showed a textbook case of an unprovoked assault. Judge Washington never raised her voice, never made a single threatening gesture. The audio confirmed that Evans's aggression went from 0 to 100 in a matter of seconds. There was no gray area here. It was a full-blown power trip caught in 4K. But then, investigators opened up a whole new can of worms. They didn't just look at this one incident. They started digging into Officer Evans's old arrest reports. And what they found turned a single bad act into a pattern of abuse. They uncovered a deeply disturbing trend. Over his 10-year career, Evans had racked up dozens of complaints for using excessive force. And in nearly every single one of those cases, the story was the same. A minority suspect, a fuzzy claim of resisting arrest. And what a coincidence. No video evidence because his body cam always seemed to malfunction or was turned off right at the key moment. They found buried reports about a college kid who was tackled and pepper sprayed for jaywalking. They found a report about an elderly tourist who was detained for loitering while he was just looking at a map. In all those other cases, the victims were scared into silence. They didn't have the money for expensive lawyers, and they definitely didn't have the power of the city's highest court on their side. Their complaints were filed away and forgotten, dismissed by supervisors who just looked the other way. Evans had been getting away with being a bully in a uniform for a decade, protected by that infamous blue wall of silence. But this time, that wall came crumbling down. Judge Washington's lawyers subpoenaed everything. They didn't just want justice for what happened on the steps of City Hall. They wanted a complete audit of every single arrest Evans and his unit had ever been involved in. The investigation showed that Evans's squad had been aggressively profiling people to hit unofficial arrest quotas, specifically targeting people they thought wouldn't be able to fight back. What happened on the courthouse steps wasn't a one-time thing. It was the predictable result of a career built on unchecked aggression and bias. The evidence was just overwhelming. The clear, professional photos from the magazine shoot were the final nail in the coffin, especially when you put them side by side with the shaky, chaotic Bodycam footage. The lie was out there for everyone to see. In his initial report, Evans had claimed Washington was menacing and combative. The pictures showed a woman standing with poise and dignity. The video showed a man acting with pure, unhinged aggression. The system that had protected him for so many years was now taking him apart, piece by piece, and it felt like every person he had wronged in the past was finally about to have their day in court. The courtroom was dead silent, but the tension was so thick you could feel it. For the first time in his career, Rick Evans wasn't there as an officer of the law. He was the defendant, out of his uniform, and wearing a cheap, ill-fitting suit. He just looked small and broken. On the other side of the room sat Anaya Washington. She wasn't wearing her judge's robes this time. She was dressed in a professional navy blazer, watching everything unfold with that same cool, unshakable calm she had on the day of the incident. The evidence was ironclad. Evans's defense team tried to claim he'd just made an honest mistake in a stressful situation, but the jury wasn't buying it for a second. They'd all seen the video. They'd seen the smirk on his face. They'd heard the anger in his voice. They saw a man who thought his badge gave him a free pass to bully whoever he wanted. The verdict came back fast, and the punishment was groundbreaking. The judge's gavel came down hard, not the one Evans had shattered, but the heavy one of the court. The ruling was a decisive victory for Judge Washington. The city was ordered to pay her $7.9 million in damages, one of the biggest payouts for a civil rights case in the city's history. The judge made a point to include punitive damages, which weren't just to compensate Judge Washington, but to punish the department for letting this kind of aggressive culture grow for so long. But the money was just a number. The real justice was personal. The police commissioner himself took the stand to announce the department's decision. Rick Evans was fired, effective immediately. But the final hit was the one that really stung. Because his actions were ruled as malicious and outside the scope of his police duties, the review board used a rare rule to strip him of his entire pension. 20 years on the force, the retirement he was banking on, was all gone in an instant. He was leaving his job with nothing. No badge, no gun, no pension, and zero respect. As the bailiffs led him out, he had to do the walk of shame right past the reporters. The same photographers he had threatened on the City Hall steps were all there waiting for him. But this time, he couldn't tell them to stop. He couldn't threaten to arrest them. He just had to cover his face as the cameras flashed, becoming nothing more than a cautionary tale in a textbook about police misconduct. Judge Washington watched him go. She didn't crack a smile or celebrate. She just gave a small nod to her lawyers, got up, and walked out the front doors, the very same doors she had been dragged through just a few months earlier. This time, the officers standing guard saluted her as she passed. The message had been sent, loud and clear. The law is for everyone, especially the people paid to enforce it. Evans thought he was above the law, but he learned the hard way that while justice might be blind, it certainly isn't deaf. And it heard everything he said. $7.9 million. That's an amount of money that can change a person's life. But for Anaya Washington, this was never about getting rich. It was about sending a message, and you can't put a price tag on that. In a final, classy move that shut down all her critics, Judge Washington didn't keep a dime of the settlement money. Instead, she used every last cent to start a legal aid fund for people with low incomes who have been the victims of false arrest and police brutality. She took her own horrible experience and turned it into a shield for people who don't have a robe or a gavel of their own to protect them. This story is a harsh but necessary reality check. Officer Evans's career didn't end because of bad luck or some simple misunderstanding. It ended because of his own arrogance. He looked at a powerful, dignified woman, but his own prejudice was like a blindfold. He didn't see what was really there. He only saw what he wanted to see, a target. As Judge Washington so powerfully stated in her final press conference, "Your prejudice blinded you so much that you couldn't recognize justice when she was standing right in front of you." This should be a warning to anyone in a position of power. A badge, a uniform, or a fancy title isn't a license to be a bully. It's a huge responsibility. In a world where there's a camera on every corner and a smartphone in every pocket, there's nowhere left to hide. If you abuse your power, the truth will find its way out. The world is always watching. And as Rick Evans learned, Karma comes for you fast. He thought he was the one in charge, but because of his own pride, he ended up being the one who paid the price. This whole thing is a stark reminder that judging someone based on their looks or their race isn't just wrong, it's a reflection of your own weakness. True character is shown in how you treat people who you think have no power. When you treat someone with disrespect, you're not telling the world who they are. You're telling the world who you are. Whatever you do, never judge a book by its cover. You have no idea who you're talking to. The person you're rude to today could be the one wearing the robe at your trial tomorrow. Treat everyone with dignity, not because of who they are, but because of who you are. If you enjoyed seeing justice served ice cold, please go ahead and destroy that like button. It lets YouTube know you want to see more stories where the truth comes out. And if you think Officer Evans got exactly what he deserved by losing his pension, type justice in the comments right now. I want to see a flood of support for Judge Washington. But don't click away just yet. If you thought this story was wild, you won't believe what happens in this next one. A billionaire CEO goes undercover as a janitor at his own company to expose a corrupt manager who's been stealing from his employees. And the scene where he gets fired is absolutely epic. Click the video on your screen right now. You do not want to miss it. I'll see you over there.